Hello, everyone. Today, we're stepping into a time often romanticized for its castles and chivalry, but don't let the fairy tales fool you. The Dark Ages weren't so much dark because of mystery, but because of mud. Relentless, inescapable, soul-soaking mud. And that's just the beginning. You've probably seen the usual depictions: knights in gleaming armor, banquets piled high, dramatic torch-lit corridors. But let's set the record straight. Unless you were born noble, and statistically you weren't, your medieval life would have involved more back pain than bravery, more hunger than heroism. In this journey, we're not climbing towers or slaying dragons. We're walking barefoot through fields that never end, waking to a cold hearth, and learning exactly why you wouldn't last long in the Dark Ages. And yet, somehow, they did. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time is it now. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, ease into whatever keeps you cozy, and let the quiet pull of history guide you. Because this isn't just a story. It's a step back into the mud-soaked, smoke-scented, deeply human rhythm of a forgotten time. Well, imagine this. You wake up, not to the buzz of a phone or the hum of distant traffic, but to the soft drip of rain leaking through a thatched roof. There's no pillow, no blanket, just some straw, maybe a woolen sack if you're lucky, and the ache in your bones that reminds you you're alive, barely. You're not in a storybook version of the Middle Ages, no castles, no knights in shining armor. You're just here, a small hut on the edge of a muddy field, one of dozens like it, clustered like fungi around a manor house you've never entered. The door is a wooden board that barely closes. The walls are wattle and daub, patched with whatever nature offered and time didn't yet reclaim. Your first breath of the morning tastes of smoke and damp earth. The hearth, the heart of your home, is cold. It never really burned bright, just enough to stop the frost from claiming your fingers. The air inside is thick, still heavy with last night's fire and the slow decay of wet clothes. You hear the grunt of a pig outside, the cough of your neighbor, the wind shifting through holes in the thatch. You don't own a clock. Time is a shape in the sky. The pale light seeping through the shutter cracks tells you enough. It's morning. Your limbs are stiff, your mouth dry. You stretch, but not too much. The chill makes your joints protest. Your sleep was light, broken by the creaks of wind and wood, and by dreams that blur with your waking. There's no privacy here. Your family, if you're lucky enough to have one, shares this space. Children roll beside you in the straw, their small bodies curled up like kittens. Someone moans, maybe from a fever, maybe from the weight of another day that hasn't even begun. You sit up. Your feet touch the earth. There's no floor. Just dirt, beaten down by time and footsteps. It's cold, wet. Every season leaves its signature on the ground. Frost, mud, dry dust. Today, it's mud, thick and clinging. Outside, the world is gray. Mist hugs the ground like a secret. Crows call from bare branches. Somewhere far off, a bell rings. Not for you. It calls the monks to prayer. Your prayers are different, simpler, quieter, more desperate. You pull on your clothes. They're rough, scratchy. A tunic made from homespun wool. Your only pair of shoes, if you have them, are stiff with age and dirt. Everything smells faintly of smoke and sweat. Your hands are calloused, nails stained with the life of the land. There's no mirror. You haven't seen your own face in weeks, but you can feel it. The sun has kissed it unevenly. The wind has drawn fine lines. You carry the map of your labor there. You step outside. The wind greets you first, tugging at your sleeves. The chickens scurry at your feet. The path to the fields is not a path at all, just a suggestion, a memory etched in footprints and ruts. You follow it. And as you walk into your morning, you wonder, not aloud because words are for work or for God, you wonder how long you'll last. How many more mornings like this your body can endure. How many more days your mind can quiet itself enough to begin again. But there's no choice, is there? So you walk. Your stomach speaks before you do. It growls low, a reminder that hunger is not something that begins. It simply lingers, always there in the background like a stray dog at the edge of camp. You're used to it by now. Hunger has become a companion, patient and persistent. You shuffle back into the hut, or maybe you never left it entirely, just stood outside long enough to feel the wind gnaw at your skin. Either way, it's time for breakfast. Not a meal, really. More like a ritual, a gesture, something to tell your body that the day has begun, even if it won't be nourished properly. The hearth has been coaxed into life again. A few coals, maybe a fresh stick of wood if you were lucky yesterday. The pot over it is blackened from years of smoke, and inside, the same thing as always. Pottage, a sort of stew, if you can call it that. Oats, some cabbage, yesterday's water, maybe a bit of onion. No salt, that's expensive. And meat? You smile at the thought. Meat is for saints' days or someone else's plate. You ladle out what you can. It slops into a wooden bowl, steaming faintly, smelling of earth and age. You tear a piece of coarse bread, hard at the edges, soft in the middle if it's fresh, but today, it's not. Your teeth work harder than your hands. Chewing is labor. Swallowing feels like a decision. There's no butter, no fruit, just this. The bread might have bits of ground stone in it, from the millstones that wear down with use. You'll feel it later in your teeth, a slow, quiet erosion of enamel that tells its own tale of survival. No one talks much during breakfast. Words are wasted energy. Eyes are heavy, still negotiating with sleep. You all eat in silence, broken only by the scraping of spoons and the occasional cough. The children, if you have any, eat too. Smaller portions. Faster. Always faster. As if speed might trick the body into feeling full. Sometimes they ask for more. Sometimes you give them yours. There's a kind of peace in this, strange as it sounds. The warmth of food, however meager, is still warmth. The smoke curls in the air, soft and slow, and the bowl warms your hands. You look at the fire and pretend it's bigger than it is, that the world is smaller than it feels. Outside, the sun climbs behind the clouds. It's hard to tell the hour. Maybe you guess it by the church bell, or by the shift in the light on the mud outside your door. But you know what comes next. Work. Always work. You wipe your bowl with the last bit of bread. Nothing is wasted. Not food, not heat, not time. Everything has its place, and your place is to endure. And as you rise, your bones protest. Your fingers are already swollen from yesterday's labor. Your knees click. Your shoulders tighten before they even lift a tool. But you stand anyway. Because breakfast may be over, but the day has just begun. You step into the morning, if we can call it that. A dull gray that blankets the village, offering little warmth, even less light. The earth is soft and unwelcoming beneath your feet, clinging to your shoes in clumps. It rained last night. It always seems to have rained last night. This is your workplace, the field. No desk, no roof. Just rows of soil and the occasional crow, watching from a crooked fence post like a small god of hunger. Your tools are few and worn. A wooden hoe, a crude rake, maybe a borrowed ox if the Lord Steward allows it. But more often it's just you and your hands, blistered, split, and stained. There's no schedule. There's no break. There's only the slow, eternal rhythm of planting, tending, and praying that the harvest comes. You don't own this land. You're tied to it, like a knot that can't be undone, passed down from your father, and maybe, if you live long enough, to your son. The first task is always the same. Clear the debris the wind left behind. Twigs, stones, sometimes the bones of something small that didn't make it through the night. Then the soil must be turned again and again until it's soft enough to welcome seeds. Seeds you didn't choose from a harvest that barely fed you. Your back bends early, and it will stay bent until the sun fades again. That's just how bodies are here, shaped not by dreams but by duties. You've long stopped noticing the ache in your spine. It's like background music now. Just always there. Someone nearby hums a tune. Not for joy, not really. More like habit, like memory. The kind of sound people make when words are too expensive, too heavy for the morning. Children may be nearby, gathering sticks or chasing chickens through the underbrush. Sometimes you send them to fetch water from the stream, a half-mile away and colder than any bath you'll ever take. They carry the buckets in pairs, not because of the weight, but because of the silence. It's easier to bear when someone walks beside you. Lunch is hours away, and not much different from breakfast. So you pace yourself. You fall into the rhythm of the work, the slow drag of hoe through soil, the feel of earth beneath your nails. You don't think too far ahead, just to the next row, then the next. And maybe a short moment to straighten your back and watch a bird disappear into the woods. You hear the church bell again. Time for midday prayer. But you don't stop. You nod to the sound, a quiet pact between you and the divine. I'll pray with my work. Let this be enough. Sometimes your mind wanders to the face of someone you lost last winter, to a dream you had long ago about traveling beyond the hills, to the strange merchant who passed through last spring, his cloak lined with coins and silk. You wonder what his mornings look like, if they smell like fresh bread or new fabric, instead of wet straw and sweat. But then your tool hits a rock, and the dream vanishes. By now, your hands are filthy, the creases in your skin filled with soil. The sun is higher, if not warmer, and your body reminds you with every movement that this is your life, that your worth is measured in days survived, in fields turned, in the food that somehow appears, not always enough, but enough to try again tomorrow. As the light begins its slow descent, you pause, not to rest, just to feel the wind on your face, a brief, stolen second of stillness. Then, one more row, always one more row. By now, your skin itches beneath your tunic. Not from fabric, that, at least, you're used to, but from everything else. The grime, the sweat, the layers of yesterday still clinging to you. Cleanliness isn't a ritual here. It's a rare, sometimes mythical event. Something spoken of in church sermons or told in tales of nobler lives. You haven't bathed in weeks, perhaps months. The last time was during the feast of St. Swithin, when the river was warm enough not to cut into your bones. You remember that water, dark, sluggish, scattered with leaves. You dunked your body in quickly, eyes wary for leeches or the curious gaze of others. There was no soap, just sand in your own hands, scrubbing at a year's worth of toil. Today, there's no river, no feast. Just a tin basin in the corner of the hut, half filled with water gone cloudy. Maybe you splash some on your face, maybe you don't. It's cold and stale, and you'll be just as dirty within the hour. Your hands are always the dirtiest, cracks around your nails, soil trapped in the folds. When you eat, you taste the land you worked. When you wipe your face, the scent of smoke and sweat follows your fingers. It's not unpleasant. It's just you. Latrines? If your village has one, it's a wooden seat over a pit, surrounded by buzzing flies and the faint whiff of decay. More often, you walk to the edge of the forest or crouch in a field, glancing around, hoping for privacy that rarely exists. You cover what you can. The rest becomes part of the earth again. Smell is a constant companion. It clings to everything: clothes, hair, breath, a mixture of wood smoke, livestock, and the slow fermentation of unwashed bodies. You don't notice it anymore. But when the wind shifts, you remember that your world is steeped in scent. There's no deodorant, no mint for the breath. A sprig of rosemary tucked into your tunic is a luxury. More often, you chew parsley or cloves if the healer has any to spare. But even those are rare, saved for fevers and the dying. Your teeth? Yellowed? Cracked? You've lost a few. The pain is dull now, a background rhythm like the ache in your knees. The village healer once gave you a tincture. It burned more than it soothed. Now you just live with it. Lice are inevitable. You scratch your scalp absent-mindedly, feeling the tiny movements that betray their presence. Everyone has them. No one talks about it. You shave your head in summer, maybe, but in winter, the hair is warmth, and the lice are part of the price. Still, somehow, there is dignity in this, in the quiet endurance, in the way people carry themselves even when dirt darkens every hem. You see your reflection in a puddle, vague, wobbly, and you look tired, but not broken. You share this existence with hundreds, thousands like you. And in that, there's strange comfort. You are not alone in your filth. Not alone in your resilience. Even the Lord's servants smell the same on hot days. Even the priest scratches his arm behind the altar trying to be discreet. And so, you live with it. The stink, the solitude, the silent understanding that here, in the damp corners of time, cleanliness is a dream. But survival, that's the reality. And you've managed that another day. Just enough to lie down tonight and maybe dream of water. You don't own your home. You don't own your land. You barely own the shirt on your back. And even that came stitched together from old scraps and luck. Above you, not just in social standing, but in law, custom, and power, stands the Lord. A man of stone and steel, whose name is spoken with a mix of caution and necessity. You've seen him, perhaps, once or twice, from a distance, on a horse that looked healthier than most children in your village, his cloak lined with fur, his boots spotless despite the ever-present mud. He rides past like the seasons change, inevitable, indifferent, always just beyond reach. His manor looms at the edge of your world, larger than any hut, with walls of stone and a roof that doesn't leak. That's the image burned into your memory. Something solid, unmoving, while your life shifts like soil in a storm. You're a serf, bound to the land not by chains, but by obligation. You till his fields. You give him your grain. A portion of every harvest is his, the best portion. If the crops fail, your stomach suffers, but his cellar still fills. The steward is the one you see most, a man with ink-stained fingers and eyes that never smile. He carries ledgers thicker than his patience. When he knocks, it's not for tea. It's to collect dues, demand labor, or list the days when you must come work the domain, the Lord's own fields. Corvée, they call it. Free labor, paid only in permission to survive. And survive you must. You learn to navigate this quiet hierarchy. When to bow your head, when to keep your eyes low, when to speak, rarely, and what not to say. Defiance isn't a revolution here. It's just an early grave. You owe taxes in coin if you can find it, or in chickens, or in sacks of oats. Sometimes in labor, repairing the Lord's fences, harvesting his hay, tending his livestock. There's no negotiation, only the illusion of choice. Marriage? The Lord must approve it. Leaving the village? Also his word. Your life is a book that someone else is allowed to edit, even if they never bother to read the pages. And yet, the resentment is quiet. It simmers beneath the surface, buried under layers of fatigue and fear. You whisper complaints by the fire, but never near a window. You carve small rebellions into your routine, a slower step, a broken tool, a missed chore. Some say the Lord was chosen by God, that this order, this chain of being, is sacred. Others nod, but their eyes don't believe. Not after a winter of hunger. Not after the healer's child died while the manor held its feast. Still, there are moments when you wonder. When you see a hawk in the sky, circling freely above both hut and castle. When a child asks why things are the way they are. When the church bells ring and you're not sure if they mark a wedding or a hanging. But the thought passes because the sun is setting and you've yet to finish the day's work. And tomorrow, you owe him more. The world around you isn't just physical. It's mystical, unpredictable, and full of invisible laws. You walk a fine line each day. Not only between survival and collapse, but between two great fears that shape every decision. The forest and the church. The forest is beautiful, yes, but not in the way you might imagine from stories told in warm rooms. It's thick, dark, and pulsing with sounds you don't always recognize. During the day, you might venture to its edges to gather kindling, herbs, or mushrooms. But even then, your steps are careful, reverent. You know the tales. Everyone does. Of travelers who vanished without a trace, of beasts with eyes like lanterns and teeth like knives, of witches who brew storms in wooden bowls, or spirits that steal breath in the night. The trees are old. Older than your village, older, maybe, than the name of your Lord. In summer, the forest hums. In winter, it groans. And when the wind rushes through its branches, you don't call it music. You call it warning. You carry charms, a piece of iron, a knot of ash bark, a prayer whispered 3 times with your eyes shut, not because you believe in magic, but because you fear it just enough not to take chances. Then there's the church. Different kind of forest. Less wild, but no less full of shadows. The priest in your village is not cruel, not outwardly, but his voice carries weight. His sermons speak of sin like smoke speaks of fire, always nearby. You are told what to believe, what to fear, what to hope for. Heaven is a promise, but so distant. Hell is a threat and very near. The church is the tallest building in your world, its bell louder than any cry. Inside, the air is cooler, holier, wrapped in incense and Latin words you don't understand. You kneel often, not always in understanding, but in obedience. You fast when told. You confess what you remember. You repent for things you don't quite grasp, because not repenting is worse. The forest threatens your body, the church claims your soul, and in between, that's where you live. Superstition and scripture live side by side in your hut. You hang a crucifix above the door and a bundle of herbs near the window. One is for God, the other, just in case. At night, your dreams sometimes blur the two. A horned creature, half shadow, half preacher, whispering rules in your ear. You wake sweating, unsure if you've sinned in sleep. You mutter a prayer anyway. Your neighbors speak in hushed tones about omens. A cow that won't give milk. A baby born with a mark. A raven circling the chapel roof. The priest calls it nonsense, but even he knocks the doorframe 3 times before entering. So you live in quiet tension between tree and tower, between beast and bishop. You listen closely, step lightly, cross yourself when the wind changes. Because in this world, fear is not a weakness, it's survival. You don't call it a hospital. There is no clean linen, no silver instrument shining under candlelight. What you visit is a hut, slouched into the earth like an old woman's back, with smoke curling from a hole in the roof and herbs hanging in bunches from the beams. The healer's door creaks when you push it. Inside, it's dark, not because the sun isn't shining, but because too much light might offend the things that dwell here. Spirits, perhaps, or just the past. The air is thick with smells. Dried lavender, rotting roots, animal fat, and something burnt you can't quite name. She is there, always. No one calls her doctor. She's too old for that, or too wise. You don't ask her age. She seems older than the trees, older than the stones at the crossroads. Her hands are stained with crushed leaves, her nails dark with soil and tinctures. Her eyes don't blink much. They just see. You sit on a stool that wobbles. Your side aches. Your tooth throbs. Your child hasn't slept in 2 nights, burning with fever. You don't speak first. You wait. She can see pain before you explain it. She touches your wrist, your forehead, your chest. Her fingers are cool, not unkind, but purposeful. She mutters things to herself, to the room, to the sickness. You listen, as if her words might pull the illness out of your bones. She reaches for her shelf. Jars of strange things. Dried frogs, rust-colored powders. A feather that might be from no bird you've ever seen. She chooses something simple this time. Willow bark soaked in rainwater, wrapped in a cloth. For the fever. For the ache, for something that cannot be named. You're told to rest, but rest is a joke, So instead, you chew the bark or boil it into tea. Bitter, sharp, like licking the memory of trees. It helps, maybe. Or maybe belief is the stronger medicine. Sometimes she bleeds you with a sharp sliver of bone or a heated needle. The pain is real, the relief uncertain, but it feels like doing something, and that is worth more than nothing. She doesn't ask for coin. Sometimes she takes a chicken, or a favor, or nothing at all. Only a glance that says, "You owe me." And in this world, debts aren't always counted in silver. The church doesn't like her. They say her ways are pagan, suspicious. But the priest's prayers don't mend bones. And when a child coughs for 3 days straight, no one waits for Latin absolution. They knock on her door. You've seen her chant, not loudly, just under her breath, while crushing seeds or stirring ash. You don't know what she says, and you don't ask. You just hope she says it for you. Once, a woman died here. The healer lit a candle, washed her body with nettles, and sang a song no one knew. Not even the dead woman's mother. But it felt right. You leave the hut carrying a poultice and a strange sense of calm. Not confidence, not cure. Just the feeling that someone saw you, fully. Not just your skin, but the fear beneath it. The road back home is short. The ache in your side is still there. But it walks beside you now, not inside you. You'll rest when you can. Drink the tea. Tie the herb bundle over your doorway. And wait. 'Cause in the dark ages, healing was not always a victory. Sometimes it was simply the act of being seen. The market day begins long before the sun crests the trees. You wake in darkness again, but today there's a ripple of energy in the village. People moving with a bit more urgency, carts creaking louder, animals protesting their harnesses. It's not joy, exactly. More like anticipation laced with grit. You don't go to the market to shop. You go to trade, or to watch, or to stand and breathe in a world slightly larger than your own. The market square is half a day's walk, past fields and hedgerows, following paths so well trodden they feel carved into the earth. By the time you arrive, your boots are caked with mud, and your hands ache from carrying whatever you've brought to offer. Eggs, maybe, or a woven basket, or a rough wedge of cheese. Nothing luxurious. Just enough to hope for a few coins, a small bag of salt, maybe a piece of cloth. The square is already alive. Not bustling. That's a word for cities. But chaotic in its own way. Stalls leaning like tired men. Goods laid out on blankets or balanced in baskets. Pigs squeal. Goats tug at ropes. Children weave through legs like eels in a stream. The air smells of smoke, damp wool, and meat that sat too long in the sun. It's not unpleasant, just thick, full of life and time. Someone roasts onions on a spit. Someone else sharpens knives on a stone, the screech cutting through the murmur like a crow's cry. You walk slowly, eyes alert. Not for pickpockets, you have nothing worth stealing, but for bargains. That rare moment when someone's desperation matches your need. A broken tool you can mend. A half sack of grain that looks better than it smells. The middlemen are here too. Men with cloaks too fine for the mud, who speak in loud voices about things you can't afford. Wool by the bolt, spices in tiny bags, honey from across the river. They rarely look at you, but you hear them, and you remember. Trade is negotiation here. not law. No prices marked, just looks, nods, hands held up in suggestion. Sometimes your silence is the best weapon. Let the other sweat first. Let the deal hang in the air like fog. There's entertainment too. A fiddler with 3 strings and 1 tune. A man with painted birds he swears can talk. A woman who sells herbs and curses in equal measure. Children gather around, wide-eyed, not caring if it's real. They just want to feel something new. At midday, you eat. Maybe a bit of fish wrapped in leaves, or bread so dry it cracks. You sit on the edge of a well, your feet aching, your stomach half full, and for a moment, you feel almost elsewhere. Not a peasant, not a name on a ledger. Just a person among people, watching the world turn. But the market doesn't last. By afternoon, people begin to pack up. The shouting softens. The firewood grows scarce. Deals are struck in final glances. And you? You count your gains. A new comb, a pouch of barley. A story overheard. It's not much. Still, you walk home slower. The sky is turning gold, and the mud doesn't seem quite so heavy. You carry your things, and the noise of the day, and the strange comfort of knowing that for a few hours you were part of something larger than your plot of land. Tomorrow it's back to the fields. But tonight, you'll remember the market. Not just for what you got, but for what it reminded you still exists. You don't check a forecast in the morning. You check the sky, the wind, the feel of the earth beneath your soles. You sniff the air like an animal, trained by years, not by maps or charts, but by sheer survival. The weather doesn't just visit here, it rules. In the dark ages, the sky decides everything. What you plant, when you reap, how much you eat, and when you sleep hungry. The gentle spring breeze can mean a good harvest. A late frost can mean death. There's no margin, no warehouse, no safety net. If the weather turns against you, you lose. Crops, livestock, maybe family. Rain is not romantic here. It's relentless, cold. It pounds on thatch like war drums and soaks the fields into a slick, sucking trap. You've watched oxen sink, their legs swallowed as they strain against plows. You felt the mud cling so hard to your feet it felt like the earth was trying to keep you. And when it doesn't rain, worse, sometimes. The sun bakes the soil into a cracked crust. Seeds vanish into dust. Wells dry. You pray for clouds. You watch the sky like a lover waiting for a sign, desperate, hopeful, betrayed. Storms come with little warning. The wind howls through the village like a voice too old to belong to anything living. Trees bend. Roofs lift. Sometimes a bolt of fire licks the sky and finds your neighbor's barn. You run with buckets. It's never enough. Winter is its own kind of cruel. The cold doesn't bite. It seeps into your bones, into your breath, into the quiet spaces between your thoughts. The fire never seems warm enough. Blankets never thick enough. You sleep with your hands tucked close to your heart, as if guarding the last bit of you that still burns. Snow can be beautiful, yes, but only when seen from a place of safety. You don't have that. Snow is hunger. It's silence. It's a child's cough in the night that won't go away. It's a cracked bowl and frozen fingers fumbling to light damp kindling. And wind, the constant tireless wind, rattles shutters, carries voices, turns paths into confusion. You wrap your cloak tighter, head down, and hope your breath lasts until you reach the woodpile or the well. There are no seasons here, not really, just shifting types of hardship. When a harvest is good, you don't celebrate right away. You store, you guard, you remember, because you know what the next year could bring, what it has brought before. Famine is never far. It waits like a shadow at the corner of the field. The church says weather is divine will, a punishment or a blessing. You don't argue. But sometimes when you're out in the middle of a frozen field or watching storm clouds devour the horizon, you wonder if the gods even notice. Still you rise, you step into the mud, into the wind, into the cold, because the field won't wait. The fire won't feed itself, and neither will you. You live at the mercy of the sky, and somehow you endure it. There's laughter in the village, light, high-pitched, the kind that floats through open shutters and makes the shadows seem a little less deep. It belongs to the children, your children perhaps, or your neighbors, or both, since they often run together like streams after rain. They don't know yet what the world asks. Their knees are always scabbed, their fingers always sticky. They build castles from mud, not knowing that the real ones are made of rules and pain. They chase chickens, wrestle with pups, shout nonsense at the sky. But even that joy is borrowed time. Childhood in the dark ages is short, brutally so. By 7, a child isn't a child. They're a worker, a helper, a shoulder smaller than yours, but just as burdened. Boys follow their fathers into the field, carry buckets half their weight, swing tools they can barely lift. Girls help their mothers, grinding grain, mending hems, minding infants. Play becomes task. Curiosity becomes caution. There's no school, no books. If they learn letters, it's through the church, and only if someone deems it worthwhile. Most never will. Their world is oral. Learn through stories whispered by the hearth and the hard correction of doing something wrong. Sickness is a constant shadow. Fevers come fast, hot as fire, and linger like ghosts. A cough can stay for weeks, then disappear, or turn into something that takes a child in the night. No warning, no reason. You've buried a child before. Maybe more than one. Small graves, hastily dug, marked with stones and silent prayers. Grief doesn't scream here. It hardens into silence, into the way a mother stares too long at the floor, the way a father works longer the next day and the next. Even those who grow, who survive, carry the signs. Rickets bends bones, scars from burns or bites or poorly healed breaks, teeth gone before they've truly settled, eyes dimmed from hunger. Yet they persist. Children are strange miracles. They laugh even after sorrow. They play in mud even after watching someone be buried in it. They learn to live with less and dream with more. You teach them what you can, how to tell when the rain will fall, how to tie a bundle of herbs for sleep, how to keep quiet when the steward is near. You tell them stories, not to entertain, but to prepare, about saints and sinners, about wolves in the woods and kings who never come. Sometimes you wonder what they'll remember. Whether the warmth of your hand will last longer in their mind than the sting of cold mornings. Whether the songs you hum will echo when they have children of their own. You hope they'll grow stronger, kinder, luckier. But mostly, you hope they'll grow. Because here, that alone is a kind of miracle. When the sun begins its slow descent behind the hills, your body sighs before your voice ever does. The light fades, not like a curtain being drawn, but like a candle being pinched by unseen fingers. Slow, soft, inevitable. And with it, the shape of your world begins to change. You return home, buoys heavy with muck, shoulders hunched, eyes half closed even before you sit. Inside, the hut is dim. A single flame dances from the hearth, more smoke than light, casting long shadows on the walls. Shadows that breathe with the flicker, that stretch and shrink as if alive. This is not the soft glow of lanterns. It's fire, raw and immediate. You don't waste oil on lamps unless someone is sick or dying. The fire is enough to cook, enough to see the floor, and just enough to keep the dark outside from swallowing you whole. Evenings are quiet, not serene, but restrained, like breath held too long. You eat what remains from the morning's pottage, reheated until it resembles paste more than food. Bread that's gone hard. Maybe, if fortune smiled, a few pickled vegetables or a crumb of cheese. You sit with others. Family, perhaps, or neighbors who drift in to share the fire in a moment of stillness. You don't talk much. The words have been spent during the day. Now's the time for silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because the night listens. Children fall asleep early, curled together like pups near the warmest corner. Their breathing, soft and rhythmic, becomes the lullaby you never sing. But sleep doesn't come easily to you. Not here, not yet. There are sounds in the dark. The howl of something distant, maybe a wolf, maybe just the wind carving its loneliness through the trees. The crack of wood settling, the hush of footsteps on cold soil, imagined or not. You listen. You always listen. Fear lives here. Not in screams, but in quiet glances. The fear of sickness returning, of thieves, of fire catching the thatch while you sleep. Of spirits, maybe. The kind the church warns of, and the kind the healer won't speak of unless pressed. You cross yourself before bed. You tie a sprig of sage near the door. You check that the coals are low, that the latch is fastened, that no shadow sits where there should be none. Then you lie down. The bed is not a bed, just straw, sometimes with a cloth thrown over it, sometimes nothing at all. Your joints protest, your skin prickles, your thoughts stretch out into the darkness like threads fraying. You replay the day in your mind, the steps taken, the words said, the things you forgot to do, and the things you wish you had. And then, perhaps, you begin to drift, not into dreams, but into something softer, a halfway place where fear dims and the fire's breath is the only rhythm. Night in the dark ages is not peace, but it is pause. And in that pause, a fragile kind of safety. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, the village pulses with something close to joy, not the loud, brash kind, but something quieter, more collective. A stirring, a hum beneath the usual ache of daily life, a feast day, a holy day, a festival. The church marks the calendar, but the people bring it to life. You wake to sound, not birds or wind, but voices. Laughter. A child running past with ribbons in her hair. Even the animals seem confused, as if sensing that today will not follow the usual rhythm. Work still happens. Always, but with different tools. Today, you're not sowing field, you're raising tents, stringing garlands of dried flowers, sweeping the square with brooms borrowed and shared. There's excitement in the air, edged with smoke and anticipation. Someone plays a drum. Another pulls a pipe from a coat and begins a tune. It's off key, but it doesn't matter. The music's not for perfection, it's for movement. Feet begin to tap, bodies sway. Even the old nod their heads, remembering younger days. Food appears almost miraculously. Loaves that have been hoarded, cheese unwrapped from linen, a pig roasted on a spit, a true luxury. You eat more today than you have in weeks. The taste is richer, not because of spice, but because of company, because you're not eating in silence. Mead flows. Ale, too. Cups passed from hand to hand, sloshing, refilled, spilt, laughed over. Your cheeks flush, not just from drink, but from release. The weight you always carry loosens just a little. The aches are still there, but quieter, tucked beneath the warmth of fermentation and song. Children run wild, chasing each other, tumbling in grass, pretending to be knights, saints, monsters. They'll sleep deeply tonight, tangled in dreams of firelight and banners. There are games, simple but fierce, a race, a tug of war, a contest to see who can lift the heaviest stone. The winner gets a token, maybe a ribbon, maybe a kiss. Pride is the real prize. And for a day, that's enough. And then the masks come out. Not all festivals have them, but when they do, the air changes. Faces are hidden. Eyes gleam through holes. You might be standing next to your neighbor or your rival or the girl who once caught your eye, but you don't know. That's the point. For a night, everyone is no one. The rules bend. Laughter grows stranger. There's dancing, too. Circles that swell and break. Hands that reach out, pull you in, let you go. The ground is uneven. Your legs uncertain. But you move anyway. Because movement is freedom. Because music is the one thing that doesn't ask anything of you. As the fire climbs higher, you sit back and watch. Flames lick the sky. Sparks rise like stars too small to matter. Faces glow with the orange kiss of heat. For a moment, one small, perfect moment, the world doesn't feel cruel. It just feels alive. Later, when the fire fades and the songs slur into silence, you walk home barefoot. The mud is cold again. The stars above look indifferent, as always, but you don't mind. You've been reminded of something, that even in a life made of toil and hunger, there are still nights when you feel full. Even if tomorrow it all begins again. Your days may be measured in footsteps and chores, but your years, your entire sense of time, belong to the church. It begins with the bells. They ring before you're ready, before the sun can even fully wake, not just to mark time, but to remind you, this is not your day. It belongs to something higher, something older, something written in Latin, on parchment you'll never read. The calendar is holy. That's what they tell you. You don't celebrate birthdays. You celebrate saints, dozens of them. St. Cuthbert, St. Agnes, St. someone you've never heard of, but must honor without question. Their days decide when you fast, when you feast, when you plant, when you pray. Every week begins with Mass. You wear your cleanest tunic, which is not clean. You kneel on cold stone or muddy straw, listening to words that rise and fall like waves, beautiful and distant. Latin, Always. The priest speaks, and you nod. You don't understand, but you feel the shape of holiness in his tone. You believe because you must. Confession is harder. You speak in hushed tones, eyes down. You confess not only what you've done, but what you've thought. Impure thoughts, angry ones, doubts. You confess feeling tired. You confess not feeling enough. Penance follows. Prayers mostly. Repetition as redemption. You say the words again and again, hoping that the echo counts. The sacraments mark your life like milestones. Baptism at birth, you won't remember it. Confirmation, if the priest stays long enough in the village. Marriage, if permitted. Last rites, whispered over your fading breath. You carry guilt like a shadow. Even on good days, there's a sense that you've fallen short. That joy itself might be a kind of sin if it lingers too long. The church teaches humility. You interpret it as smallness. But still, there's comfort here. The church is often the only stone building in your world. Its walls are cool in summer, shelter in storms. Its candles flicker even when the rest of the village is dark. You go there to pray, to beg, to rest, to remember the faces of those buried nearby. Holy days are holy because they interrupt. They give you rest, brief though it is, a pause from labor, a sanctioned breath, a chance to hear music, to see the priest raise the chalice and pretend, just for a moment, that grace is something you can hold. The painted saints on the wall watch you. Their eyes are chipped, their halos faded, but you look back anyway, hoping, questioning, grateful. You might not understand the theology, the rules, the thousand small expectations, but you understand hope and fear. And the church offers both. You're not old by the measure of years. You are old by the measure of survival. 35 winters behind you, perhaps 40. Each one a notch on the spine, a narrowing of the joints. Your hair, once thick, is now thinner, streaked with the gray of ash and fatigue. Your skin bears the texture of the land, cracked, weathered, uneven. The sun has written lines on your face, and the cold has etched silence into your bones. In the village, old is a relative term. You've seen people wither young, taken by fever, childbirth, hunger, or the sharp, sudden wrongness of an accident. A falling branch, a wild boar, a cough that turned cruel. If you are here, now, watching another dusk settle over the fields, it means you outlasted someone, many someones. You don't brag. There's no honor in outliving. Just a quiet, aching weight. You speak their names less often now, not out of forgetfulness, but because you've learned that the dead prefer silence. They live in the corners of your memory, in the shape of a laugh you once knew, or in the way a certain song makes you stop, just for a second. You work less than you used to. Not by choice, your body has begun to decide for you. The tools feel heavier. The walk to the well stretches longer. You pause more, breathe deeper. Not out of leisure, out of necessity. The younger ones glance at you with a mix of respect and impatience. They call you wise, though no one taught you anything. Everything you know, you learned through pain, repetition, and watching what didn't work. You tell stories sometimes, not for entertainment, for survival. Lessons wrapped in memory. The year the river froze so hard it cracked boats. The time the crops failed and people boiled leather to eat. You tell them not to be afraid, but to be ready. Illness visits more often now, a persistent cough, a dull ache behind the eyes. You go to the healer not for a cure, but for comfort. A salve, a warm word, something that feels like care. You sleep lighter, wake earlier. Time becomes a thing you listen for, like distant thunder. You think more often of the end. Not with fear, but with curiosity. You wonder what your last meal will be, if your name will be remembered past the season, if the children will mimic the way you tied your belt or told your tales. Legacy is not carved into stone here. It is passed through habit. Sometimes when the sun is kind and your breath steady, you sit on a stool outside and just exist, watching the light shift through trees, listening to chickens murmur, to distant laughter, to wind in the grass. The world is quieter now, or maybe you've simply learned to hear it better. You're not waiting for death. You're walking toward it slowly, deliberately. With every step, you carry the weight of those who didn't get the chance. And in that, perhaps, there is something holy. You lie down once more on straw that smells of dust and old sleep. The hearth has dimmed to embers, glowing faintly like coals beneath snow. Your body protests even in rest, knees that throb, a back that creaks, hands stiff from holding tools too long. But this is your place, your end-of-day rhythm. The moment the world narrows to just your breath and the hush beyond the door. Outside, the wind continues its work, reshaping branches, tugging at shutters, whispering along the eaves. You listen, not for danger, but for company. The wind has known you longer than most. It has stolen your warmth, dried your sweat, and cooled your brow when fever came. It speaks in ways words can't. Your eyes find the ceiling, low and splintered, patched with hope and hay. You stare, not to see, but to remember. The days blur, the market, the births, the funerals, the seasons turning like mill wheels. Life in the dark ages is not a storybook. It's a slow, unglamorous act of endurance. Yet it is full of dirt and ache and quiet victories, full of stolen laughter, full of moments that mattered only because someone else was there to witness them. A child's grin, a shared crust of bread, a hand on your shoulder when grief sat too heavy. You think of names, of those gone, of those yet to be. The past isn't behind you. It's beside you, breathing, watching. Every path you walk still holds the print of your feet, even if the rain has tried to wash it away. You do not expect your story to be remembered. There will be no songs, no carvings, no dates etched into books. But still, you were here, in the mud, in the toil, in the smoke-filled mornings and bone-deep nights. You were here, and perhaps that is enough. Your breath slows, the fire sighs. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl calls, ancient and knowing. The world tilts gently toward silence. And you let go. You're not a criminal. Not really. But that doesn't matter here. In the village, justice doesn't always begin with truth. It begins with suspicion. And suspicion spreads faster than fire on thatched roofs. It starts with a look. A neighbor sees you walking alone. A chicken goes missing. Someone's bread dough doesn't rise. A child falls ill. And suddenly, your name floats through whispered conversations like smoke, soft but clinging. There are no lawyers, no written rights, Justice in your world is loud, physical, and often cruel. The man who lost his goat points a finger, and the village gathers, not to debate, to decide. If you're lucky, they ask the steward. If you're unlucky, they go straight to the priest. The priest frowns. He strokes his beard, sighs heavily, and speaks of God's will. But his eyes don't look at heaven. They look at you. And what he's really weighing is fear. Not of guilt, but of unrest. Better to appease the crowd than risk a grumble becoming a storm. The trial is not what you imagine. There's no judge in robes, no jury of peers. There's a fire, a bucket of water, and a stone. Maybe a rusty iron bar. Maybe just a hole in the ground and too many eyes. If you're accused of theft, perhaps they'll strip you to your waist, tie your hands, and make you walk across glowing embers. If your feet blister, you're guilty. If they don't, well, then maybe God protected you. Maybe. Or they throw you into the river, tied to a log. If you sink, you're an innocent. If you float, you're a witch. Either way, it's a bad swim. There's another method. Trial by combat. That sounds noble in stories, but in your village, it means you and your accuser get sticks, or fists, or whatever you can grab, and the one who bleeds more, or screams first, loses. Not justice, just exhaustion. Sometimes, it's settled by oath. You swear on the bones of a saint that you're innocent. Then you find 12 men willing to say they believe you. If you can't find them, or if they hesitate, the doubt becomes its own verdict. People don't always want you punished. Sometimes they just want a show, a ritual, something to convince themselves the village is still safe, that chaos is under control, that whatever went wrong wasn't just life being unfair. It was someone's fault. You go home that night bruised, maybe limping, maybe cleared, but never clean. Once accused, you carry a new kind of weight, not proof, just memory. People look at you differently. Children quiet when you pass. No one asked you to watch their sheep. You didn't do it. But that was never the point. Here, justice isn't about guilt. It's about survival. And you survived. This time. You were always good with your hands. From the time you first shaped a piece of wood into something useful, a spoon, a peg, a stool, people noticed. You had a way with tools. A quiet patience. You saw shapes hidden in raw things and coaxed them out with care. That should be a gift. And for a while, it is. People come to you. First for simple things. A bucket mended. A chair leg replaced, then more. A hinge for a door. A cradle for a newborn. A walking stick for an elder who once laughed at your youth. You fix what they thought was broken. You shape what they only imagined. And in return, you receive bread, eggs, sometimes coin. A nod of respect. A second glance from someone who once walked past you without seeing. But then something goes wrong. A tool breaks too soon. A house you helped repair catches fire. A child who slept in your carved cradle falls ill. And suddenly, whispers begin. Maybe it's the way he works alone. Maybe it's the strange marks he carves in the wood. Maybe it's not just skill. Maybe it's something else. You don't have magic, but that doesn't matter. Here, skill too rare becomes suspect. Beauty too precise looks unnatural. If you cure a problem no one else could fix, then maybe you caused it to begin with. Someone calls you clever, but it sounds like an accusation. Another asks if you pray often. A third asks if you've ever read, even though you can't. Questions that carry blades inside them. One morning, you find a dead chicken on your doorstep. Not yours. Its neck twisted. A sign, maybe. Or a warning. You bury it in silence and tell no one. You start to dull your work. Let the corners stay rough. Pretend a task takes longer than it does. Let mistakes slip through, not because you want to, but because perfection is dangerous. Still, some people believe in you. A few. The desperate, mostly. Those who've tried everything else and now knock softly on your door, asking for help without words. You help them. Quietly. Because you remember when your skill was pride, not burden. Sometimes, though, when the wind rises and the village dogs howl, you sit by the fire and wonder, is it better to be average and safe? Or gifted and watched? You stare at your hands, at the rough skin, the cracks, the small scar where a chisel slipped last winter. These hands have fed you, saved others, shaped comfort out of chaos. But in this place, in this time, they are also the hands of someone people fear just enough to never fully trust. You cannot undo the talent. So instead, you keep working, carefully, silently, as if the wood is listening too. You've lived your whole life in a village no bigger than a morning's walk. The world beyond the tree line is mostly myth, full of towns you've never seen, roads you've never walked, and names that only live in sermons and songs. But one day, something shifts. A sickness, a vow, a dream. A priest says your soul is heavy. A healer says a cure lies far from home. Or maybe you simply wake up and feel the weight of everything you've never known pressing against your chest. So you decide, or rather, it's decided for you. You'll go on pilgrimage. You tie what little you have in a bundle. Bread, a dried apple, a cloth with the mark of your village sewn into it, so that if you die, they'll know where to send your soul back to. You don't own a map. You follow paths carved by feet older than yours. At first, the road feels like freedom. Trees arch overhead like guardians. The air smells of moss and dust. Every step forward feels like shedding something, fear, routine, the constant weight of watching the same sun rise over the same field. But the road is long and hard. Your feet blister. Your shoulders ache from the strap of your bundle. Rain soaks through your tunic and settles in your bones. You sleep in barns, beneath hedges, beside strangers who mumble in their sleep. Sometimes you're welcomed. Sometimes you're chased off with curses and stones. You pass other pilgrims. Some are silent, walking as if speaking would undo their purpose. Others chant prayers under their breath like a rhythm to pace their steps. You nod. Sometimes you share food. More often, you share silence. You reach shrines along the way. Small places, a statue, a cross, a spring said to cure blindness. You kneel. You press your fingers to the water, then to your face. You don't feel changed, but you pretend you do. That's part of the journey. The relics come later. Bones of saints. Pieces of cloth touched by miracles. You touch them too, not because you understand, but because you hope. Hope that something might shift inside you, that something holy might notice you in return. At the great cathedral, the destination, whatever it is, you weep. Not from awe, though the place is grand. You weep from exhaustion, from having arrived, from knowing you must now turn back, carrying nothing but blisters, a badge sewn onto your sleeve, and maybe a story no one will believe. And yet, you feel different. You saw towns, roads that stretched like thoughts too long to finish, faces that didn't know your name. You heard bells from churches built like mountains, smelled spices you couldn't name. You tasted honey sold by strangers, heard songs that didn't rhyme in your tongue. And when you return, the village looks smaller. The fields seem quieter, the sky more familiar. When people ask about your journey, but you speak little. You keep it for yourself, not out of pride, but because something about walking that far and returning made your soul quieter. You're not holier, not stronger, just different, as if a small piece of the road never let go of you. The day ends, not in silence, but in stories. As the fire settles into a soft orange glow and the cold breath of night brushes at the shutters, you sit close to the hearth, knees bent, eyes half closed. Around you, others gather. Family, neighbors, a child asleep in someone's lap, a dog curled against the door. There's little light, just enough to see faces in flicker and shadow. That's when the stories begin. Not read, told. Books are not for your hands. They belong in churches, chained to desks, filled with words in languages you don't know. But your stories live in the mouth, passed like bread, warm, rough, sustaining. The oldest voice begins. Always the same man or woman, with wrinkles that map entire seasons. They start slow, maybe with a name, real or imagined. Maybe with a place, one you've never seen but feel like you've lived in. The tale grows with every word. A beast that stalks the woods. A saint who cured with a touch. A farmer who tricked the devil into planting his seeds. The room shifts with the rhythm. Fire crackles at the right moment. Someone gasps. Someone laughs. These are not just stories. They are shelter from hunger, from cold, from the relentless sameness of survival. They bend time. For a few minutes, you're not you. You are the hero, the widow who outwitted a bishop, the knight whose armor was made from river stones, the girl who turned into a bird and escaped everything. Songs come next, or in between, hummed, then sung. No instruments, just voices layered like fabric. The same melody you've heard since childhood. The kind that carries sorrow and sweetness in equal measure. Some songs are for mourning. You've sung them after burials, after stillbirths, after winters that took more than their share. Others are lullabies, not just for children, but for tired minds. You sing to remember, you sing to forget, and sometimes you make your own verses, quietly, without telling anyone. A new line added to an old song, a rhythm tapped into the floor with your heel. You listen closely to the others, the way they pause, the way they smile before a punchline. You learn how to tell your own story by watching how stories hold breath in a room. This is your library, this hearth, these voices. The scent of smoke on wool, the creak of the stool, the hush that falls just before someone begins again. In a world where most of your day is spent bending, lifting, digging, obeying, the fire gives you something else. Escape. Not out of your body, but out of time. You don't dream of castles. You dream of becoming the tale someone else tells one day. Maybe a small story. Just enough to make someone's night easier. Just enough to light a face in the dark. And when you finally lay down to sleep, those words follow you. They echo inside your ribs. They wrap around the straw pillow. Because even if no one remembers your name, they might remember your story. You never chose to swear an oath. It was made for you. Like your name, your place in the village, your duty to the land. When you were born, the path ahead was already drawn, like furrows in a field. All you had to do was walk it. But the oath was real, even if no one gave you parchment. Even if your voice was never loud enough to echo through a manor hall, it lived in the way you tilled soil that wasn't yours, in the way you offered grain you didn't get to eat, in how you bowed your head when the steward passed, not out of respect, but because not bowing was dangerous. The oath is to the Lord, to the manor, to the system. But it's not made with handshakes or contracts. It's made with survival. You serve, you stay, and in return, you're allowed to live. That's the deal. It's a quiet kind of cage. When war breaks out, the oath means your son might be pulled from the fields, handed a spear, and told to march behind a banner he's never touched. When taxes rise, it means your winter rations disappear into wagons that creak away without thanks. And when the harvest is good, when the barley is tall and the wheat golden, the oath means the best goes to the manor. Always. Your joy must come in smaller portions, a warm loaf, a full belly, a night without fear. Some oaths are spoken aloud when a new lord takes over, when the church demands loyalty, when a marriage joins two houses and you're expected to cheer for a future that doesn't include you. You don't question it, not because you agree, but because questioning doesn't change anything. The steward has soldiers. The priest has God. You have blisters. The oath is hereditary. Your children inherit your debts, your duties, your deference. You teach them how to lower their eyes, how to carry, how to listen without speaking, because that's survival. That's love in this place. You wonder sometimes what it might feel like to be oath-free, to move from one village to another without being hunted as a runaway, to choose your own work, your own hours, your own dreams. But dreaming is a luxury. So instead, you wake early, work hard. Try not to think of the oath unless it speaks your name. And on rare nights, when the fire's low and the world is quiet, you let yourself imagine a single moment of defiance. Just one. Then you sigh, because imagining it is enough, and too much. The oath stays, not because you love it, but because leaving it would cost more than you have. You may not remember her name, but she remembers everything. She was married young, because that's what girls do. Or rather, that's what's done to them. A trade, a bond, a dowry passed between fathers and husbands like a goat or a plot of land. She wore linen, plain and honest, and said vows that felt more like sentences. He wasn't cruel, not all the time. He worked, drank, laughed too loud. Then one winter he coughed too hard, too long, and didn't wake up. Widow. The word follows her like a second shadow. Not always whispered, sometimes shouted. Sometimes just a glance from other men, from other women, as if her grief has turned her dangerous. She walks with her head down, not because she's ashamed, but because it's safer not to meet eyes that ask too much. She can't own the land. That passed to a cousin, or the steward, or the church, depending on who remembered first. She stays because she has nowhere else to go. She works because hunger doesn't wait for morning to pass. The children, if she has them, are both anchors and sails. They tether her to the past, but give her reason to move forward. She teaches them everything she wasn't allowed to know: how to read a cloud, how to twist rope, how to listen before speaking. And then there are the girls, the ones whose names barely pass into adulthood before being absorbed into new families, new duties. They are given, not chosen, raised to serve, to carry, to wait. A ward in a lord's house, a maid in a manor, a girl in a dress that doesn't quite fit yet, eyes darting for safety in a world where silence is mistaken for peace. Some women stay unmarried, not by choice, by circumstance. Too poor, too plain, too smart. They are labeled as odd or worse. They live on the edge of the village, both feared and ignored. People say they talk to trees, to animals, to the dead. Maybe they do. Maybe it's the only conversation that listens. And yet, they hold things together. They mend clothes, catch babies, clean the dead. They brew remedies no priest would bless, but every steward's wife demands. They know what roots calm a fever, what herb brings sleep, what flower stains cloth red. Their knowledge lives in hands, not books. You see them at dusk, gathering water, coaxing embers back to life, whispering lullabies to children that aren't theirs but feel like they could be. Their stories rarely make it into scrolls. Their names vanish from records. But their fingerprints are everywhere, on bread, on cloth, on the faces of those who survived. They are the ones who hold grief without flinching, and love without witness. You never thought much about your tools. Not at first. They were just extensions of your body. Wood shaped to fit your grip. Iron beaten into obedience by someone stronger than you. But over time, you came to understand. Tools are memory. Tools are legacy. Your hoe was passed down. The handle is worn smooth by hands you barely remember. Your father's, maybe his father's. The grain of the wood feels familiar, almost warm, like it's waiting for you each morning. It doesn't complain, even when the earth is hard and your shoulders tighter than they were last year. There's a knife in your belt. It's nothing fancy, a short blade dulled at the tip. But it's cut rope, meat, bark, even defended you once when a wild dog wandered too close. The hilt is cracked, bound with a strip of cloth. You've thought of replacing it, but somehow it still works, like you. Every tool in your hut has a sound. The rasp of a plane against oak, the creak of the yoke as oxen lean into the plow, the sharp crack when the hammer finds the right spot, or the wrong one. You know these sounds better than most songs. You repair them often, not because it's cheaper, but because replacing would mean starting over. And here, continuity is survival. A broken tool isn't just a nuisance, it's a warning. A week without it could mean a ruined harvest, a hungry winter. Sometimes you borrow tools, carefully, with respect. A missing chisel can cause a feud that lasts longer than a dry season. You return it clean, sharpened, maybe with a bit of extra oil, not for generosity, but as a kind of apology for having touched something sacred. Children watch you work, not out of curiosity, but out of inheritance. They need to know how to bind a broom head, how to smooth a cartwheel, how to tell when a handle is about to splinter. You don't teach with words. You teach with rhythm, repetition. You let them hold the tool, feel the weight, make the mistake. And when one of them finally makes something useful, a peg that fits, a scoop that holds, you don't smile wide. You just nod. That's praise enough. The wood knows. There are moments, rare ones, when you pause. When the sun hits the edge of your workbench just right, and you see your tools lined up like old friends. Not elegant, not flawless, but faithful. Covered in scratches, stains, and stories. They've helped birth things into the world. Fences, carts, cradles, even coffins. They've shaped both life and death, not by choice, but by necessity. You may not have much, but in your hands, these tools become more than objects. They become survival carved into form. You don't own a calendar. Time doesn't come to you in numbers or neat squares. It comes in smells, in sounds, in the way the light changes as it moves through your doorway. The seasons aren't concepts here. They are companions, unpredictable and sacred. Spring doesn't announce itself with blossoms. It begins with mud, thick, stubborn, and everywhere. The ground thaws slowly, sighing as it gives back the water it's held all winter. You know, spring by the first sprouts of green between the brown, by the songs of birds that dared not sing a week before, by the ache in your fingers as you coax life back into the fields. Summer is a rhythm. Work doesn't stop, but it flows differently. The sun wakes you earlier. The sweat gathers quicker. Your body adjusts, knowing the long days won't last. Crops grow thick, weeds thicker. You move like someone chased, not by fear, but by the knowledge that the season is already planning its exit. Autumn is a promise and a threat. Harvest means food. It also means no mistakes. A misjudged date, a spoiled sack, a single rainstorm too heavy, and all your work washes away. You feel autumn in your shoulders, in the urgency of each step. You stay in the fields long after the light fades, guided by instinct and memory. Winter isn't white, not here. It's brown, gray, and endless. The snow comes late, and when it does, it smothers. Not softly, fully. The days shrink into shadows. Your breath becomes a visible part of your presence. Everything slows, even your thoughts. You spend more time near the fire, your hands hovering, your eyes watching the wind for signs of what's next. You've learned to read the air. You smell frost before it arrives. You know when a storm is coming by the way birds vanish or leaves twist in the trees. The sky tells you everything, not in words, but in hue, in texture. The animals know, too. A restless cow means change. A quiet dog means danger. Bees vanishing too soon means hunger on the horizon. Your clothes change with the season, though the wardrobe is thin. You layer when the air bites. You strip down when the sun demands. There's no fashion, just function. And even then, your skin tells the story of the year. Windburn, freckles, scars, calluses that crack when the cold gets cruel. Time here is not straight. It circles. You don't look ahead. You look around. At the trees you planted as a child. At the path worn by your parents. at the way shadows stretch differently in September than they do in March. And when someone asks how old you are, you don't answer with a number. You answer with stories, with seasons, because that's how time lives here. In cycles, in signs, in silence. You've never been inside the manor hall. Few have. Fewer still leave with their heads held high. But you know it. You know the shape of its roof against the sunset. You know the smell of its chimney on feast days, rich, foreign, mouth-watering. You know the silence that falls over the village when its windows blaze with candlelight. It happens once, maybe twice a year. A wedding, a visiting noble, a saint's feast, and suddenly the manor comes alive. Servants rush, flags are raised, barrels arrive by cart, heavier than anything you'll ever own. Word spreads like smoke through straw. There's going to be a banquet. Not for you, of course. You'll work more this week? More firewood, more water, more hands summoned to clean things you'll never touch. You're not invited, but still, the banquet touches everything. You hear it before you see it. Laughter, shouted names, the uneven rhythm of music played by men paid too much to care about tune. You imagine tables groaning under meat and pies. You imagine wine, red and thick as blood, spilling freely, wiped with silk and forgotten. The food is strange, so they say. Peacocks with feathers still on, fish caught just for decoration, pastries shaped like animals stuffed with spices you can't name. Someone says there's fruit from across the sea, sweet, soft, and gone in one bite. You smell it on the wind. Meat roasting for hours. Onions stewed until they melt. Bread that was baked with care. With butter. Real butter. The kind you only taste in dreams or accidents. Children creep close to the manor. Just to see. Just to catch a glimpse. A flicker of gold. A puff of powdered hair. A scrap of music. They get chased away, of course, but not before they see enough to carry stories home. The dogs know better. They linger near the kitchen doors, and when the feast ends, when the plates are cleared and the guests stagger to bed or wherever nobility sleeps off its indulgence, that's when you come closer. Not inside, never inside. But maybe there's a scrap, a bone, a crust, something left in the muddy trail of excess. Something warm, if you're lucky. Something still carrying the flavor of a life not yours. You take it, not out of greed, but out of a hunger older than this land. A hunger for more than food, for recognition, for proof that something better exists, even if only in the scent carried on the smoke. You don't resent the lords. Resentment is too heavy. You observe, you remember, and later, by your own fire, you tell the tale. You describe the flicker of candlelight on silver, the way the music didn't stop until the moon was high, the sound of goblets clinking like bells. You tell it better than they lived it, because that's the real feast. War doesn't arrive with ceremony. It doesn't march into your village in perfect lines with trumpets and banners like the stories say. War leaks, war spreads. War shows up at the edge of your world like smoke you didn't light and can't put out. The first sign is silence, birds that vanish, merchants who don't return. Then, rumors. A rider who passed through in the night, a neighbor's cousin who fled a burned hamlet. You don't believe it at first, or maybe you do, But belief doesn't stop your hands from sowing seed or milking goats. Life must go on until it doesn't. Then comes the knock. No, not even that. Just boots in the mud, swords on hips. Men you've never met speaking loudly about things that don't concern you, but will affect you more than them. They say they fight for a king. You've never seen a king. You barely understand what one is, but now you're part of his war. They take your food, not with threats, with entitlement. A cart of barley here, the last hen there. You don't resist, not out loud. You bow, eyes low, and hold your grief until they pass. Sometimes they take people. Your neighbor's boy, dragged from the field and given a blade too big for his hands. A girl, taken to serve the camp, though everyone knows what that means. No one speaks of it. You just stare harder at the fire that night, trying to burn the memory before it sets. They promise protection. That's the word, protection. But what they mean is occupation. You feed them, you shelter them, and when they're gone, you count what's missing. Tools, dignity, peace. The fighting rarely happens near you, but when it does, it comes fast and leaves slow. A clash in the woods, over before you understand who's winning. Then days of ash, of cleaning blood from your doorstep, of burying what's left without asking which side they were on. Your field is trampled. Your well tastes strange. Your oxen gone. The priest preaches patience as if patience fills your bowl. You adapt. You hide things under floorboards, inside walls, behind the goat pen. You teach your children to be quiet, to run when they hear metal. You memorize who looked at the soldiers too long, who didn't return your greeting this week. When they finally leave, and they always do, it's not a celebration. It's relief, laced with guilt. You survived, but your neighbor didn't. Your son is quieter. Your daughter flinches at loud sounds. The seasons continue. The earth still expects to be tilled. Life resumes its old shape, but the edges are frayed. And every time the wind shifts, you wonder if war is coming again. Not like a storm, but like a shadow that never truly left. You learn to live with it. Because here, war isn't an event. It's a presence. You don't need a calendar to know when the grain runs low. The air gets sharper, the firewood shorter, the children quieter, and the bread thinner, darker, less like food and more like a memory of it. You ration, of course. Everyone does. You stretch the flour with ground bark, with old lentils, with hope. You chew slowly, not for pleasure, but to trick the stomach. Hunger teaches patience. It also teaches desperation.
At first, the village copes in silence. People trade quietly. A turnip for a cup of oats. A few eggs for the last jar of lard. The barter lines grow longer, eyes more hollow. Every deal is a small betrayal of someone else's need. But then the rumors start. The Lord's stores are full, they say. The manor still has meat. The steward's kitchen smells of butter. And suddenly, hunger grows teeth. You see it first in glances, then in fists. A loaf goes missing.
A sack of rye vanishes from the back of a cart. A man is found with his face bloodied, clutching half a crust. The priest tries to soothe with scripture, but verses don't fill bowls. Not here. Then it breaks. A group gathers, not organized, not planned, just pulled together by need. They knock on the manor door. Not to beg, to ask. Politely at first, then loudly. then with stones. You stay back, holding your child, holding your breath.
You hear shouts, the crack of wood, the sudden silence that follows the arrival of men with swords. The riot lasts minutes. The aftermath lasts weeks. The leaders vanish, taken, punished, exiled, or worse. No one speaks their names, but their absence echoes in every empty chair, every meal made quieter by fear. Winter continues. Now, hunger comes with guilt. You pray more, not because you believe more, but because it's something to do. You kneel by the fire and whisper to saints you never met.
You light candles you can't afford. You promise things you hope you'll never have to fulfill. Sometimes you dream of bread, warm, soft, crusted with seeds. You wake up chewing nothing, your mouth dry. The fire long gone out. You boil water twice just to smell something warm. You chew leather if you have it. You eat what was meant for planting, knowing you're sacrificing spring. And yet, you go on, because the body remembers how to endure, because the thaw will come eventually, because a neighbor leaves a bit of soup at your door without a word, because a chicken lays one egg and you share it, because even in scarcity, there's still something sacred, not hope, but defiance. There are nights when your body lies still, but your mind wanders. Farther than the village, beyond the fields, past the forest and the rivers you've only heard of in songs. In those moments, rare but real, you let yourself imagine a life beyond what you know. Not grand, not golden. Just different. A roof that doesn't leak. A fire that doesn't need coaxing. A bowl always full. A child's laughter that isn't tinged with worry. You imagine these things like stories, not goals, because here, goals are dangerous, but dreams whisper. They don't demand. You've heard rumors of cities where people read for pleasure, where fish is bought, not caught, where fabric comes in colors you can't even name. A world where pain isn't constant and silence isn't fear.
You wonder if it's real. You tell yourself it isn't. You tell your children it is. Hope is a strange burden. It lifts you just enough to make reality harder to carry. And yet, you keep it close, like a coin with no value but great meaning. You never spend it, but you never throw it away. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stranger, a pilgrim with soft boots and wild tales, a merchant with spices that sting your nose and make your mouth water,
A soldier who speaks of a city by the sea, where fish glisten in the sun and people sleep on cushions. You listen, you nod, you pretend not to care. But that night, the dreams come faster. Other times, hope wears simpler clothes. The birth of a child with strong lungs, the sudden warmth of early spring. A neighbor returning from illness, thinner but smiling. A clear night sky, where the stars feel less like gods and more like witnesses. You catch yourself thinking of what might be. If not for you, then for someone after you. A child, a grandchild, someone who won't have to bend the same way you did. You tell them stories, not because they're true, but because you want them to believe they could be. Maybe they'll leave, maybe they'll stay and change things. Maybe they'll forget. That's part of hope, too. Letting go of control. You don't speak of your dreams often. Not aloud. Not when the fire is low and others are near. But sometimes you hum. A tune that doesn't have words, just longing. It's enough. You learn to survive without bitterness. You work without applause. You love without always knowing how to show it. And still, you believe in something better. Not always for yourself, but for someone. Someday. There's a scrap of parchment in the priest's hand. He reads from it like it's magic. His eyes move left to right, mouth shaping sounds that carry weight. Not because of their meaning, but because of their mystery. You don't understand the words, but you feel them. You've never held a book. Not really. Maybe once you touched a page, brittle, browned at the edge, while cleaning the chapel. You traced a line of ink with your finger, felt the grooves of a world that doesn't belong to you. The written word lives far above you, in churches, in courts, in cities. It decides laws, grants land, records names, but it never writes yours. Your stories are breath. Shared at night, carved into memory, passed from mouth to ear. You've learned to listen closely, because every forgotten detail fades faster when it's only sound. Your mind holds the village's archive, who lived, who left, who never came back. The priest writes names in a book, births, marriages, deaths. You don't ask to see it. You don't need to. If your name is there, it's already out of your hands. And if it isn't, then no ink could make it real. When a royal decree arrives, it's read aloud in the square. You gather with others, squinting at the rider in his clean cloak, his stiff posture. He reads in a flat voice, careful and distant. The message is never good. Taxes rising, laws changing, a king demanding loyalty again. You nod. Not because you agree, but because that's all you can do. Sometimes a traveler offers to write a letter for coin, for those who have someone far away. You've watched it happen. An old man dictating, his voice shaking with hope. The writer scratches symbols on the page like weaving a spell. Then the paper is sealed, carried off. Maybe it's delivered, maybe not. You wonder what it says, what it feels like to send a piece of yourself across the world, wrapped in ink and folded like a prayer. You've seen children draw in the dirt, lines and shapes, a mockery of letters, a wish. You don't stop them. You encourage it. Quietly, carefully. Because maybe, just maybe, one of them will learn. Not to join the nobles, not to become a priest, but to read a recipe, a name, a promise written and meant. The written word is power. But you have something different. You have memory. You have voice. And even if your story is never written, you'll make sure it's not forgotten. They don't speak, not with words, but they know you better than most people. They recognize your step before you reach the pen. They nuzzle your side when you kneel. They sigh when you sit, as if they too are tired of this long and patient world. You've shared more days with animals than with lords or letters, chickens that scatter like laughter, a goat with a limp that still follows you, a dog old as the path to the well, who understands more than he lets on. Their lives wind through yours like threads, simple, constant, and warm. You don't name them all. That would be dangerous. Naming things makes you love them harder. And here, animals don't always stay. A winter too cold, a sickness that spreads faster than warning, a festival that demands meat. Loss arrives quietly. So you call them by their coats, their quirks, the sound they make when hungry. But some names stick. There was a cat once, black, one eye cloudy. Slept near the bread shelf, hissed at strangers. When she vanished, the house felt too still. You never said it aloud, but you missed her.
And the donkey, slow, stubborn, the kind that looked at you like he knew the joke before you told it. He carried firewood, children, dreams. He carried grief, too, when your brother passed, pulling the cart to the churchyard. You don't keep animals for comfort. They're labor, they're food. But the line between survival and affection blurs with time. A chicken still lays eggs. A cow still gives milk. But in their eyes, in their routines, you find a strange kind of peace, a rhythm.
They don't ask questions. They don't demand more than you can give. They lie beside you when the fire burns low. They wait. They watch. They forgive. You've seen a child fall asleep beside a lamb. You've seen a widow stroke a rooster's feathers like rosary beads. You've seen a boy cry harder for his dog than he did at his father's burial. You didn't judge. You understood. When you slaughter, you thank. Not with words, but with touch. A pause. A moment of stillness. The goat looks at you, and you say sorry with your eyes. It doesn't make it easier, but it makes it honest. And when the dog finally goes, not by blade, but by time, you bury him in the corner, beneath the tree that blooms first in spring. You don't mark the spot with stone or wood. You mark it with memory. Animals don't care about stories. They don't care about titles or sin. But they stayed. They walked beside you.
And in a world full of demands, they offered something rare, uncomplicated presence. You won't leave much behind. Not in the way the world counts things. No portrait, no land deed, no letters tied in silk ribbon, saved in a wooden chest. Your name may not be carved in stone. It may not even last a generation, but you will leave footprints, worn into the path between your hut and the well, in the dip on the bench where you always sat, in the low part of the fence where you leaned after work, watching the sun do what you never could, rise effortlessly. Your life leaves impressions, soft but stubborn. Your voice is echoed in the songs your children sing. Your rhythm lives in the way your neighbor swings the axe, in the recipe your daughter stirs without measuring, in the field where your grandson walks the rows you once walked barefoot. When you are gone, the village stays. The fields don't pause. The birds still return. The church bell still tolls. The wind doesn't mourn. But the silence after you will be different. Slightly. Someone will notice. They'll say, he used to sit there. Or, she always hummed that tune. Or, remember how she'd carry 3 buckets when the rest of us needed 2 hands? No one will build a statue, but someone might keep using your old knife still sharp at the edge. Someone might whisper your story at the fire, not perfectly, not with all the dates right, but with the feeling intact. That's enough. You didn't live for glory. You lived to carry things tarrying the water, wheat, wounds. You lived to keep going. And that is not small. That is not nothing. You fed others. You held hands in the dark. You stood at the edge of 1,000 small endings and still got up the next morning. And in the village, that matters. More than gold. More than books. More than names on a wall. Because in this place, what survives isn't what's written. It's what's remembered through hands and habits
and the way the earth holds warmth just a little longer where you used to walk. And one day, long after your name has vanished from any page, someone will stand in the same spot you once stood. And without knowing why, they will feel home.
And now, as the fire fades and your journey through the dark ages settles into stillness, take a breath, deep, slow, and forgiving. You've walked through mud and memory. You've felt the weight of a wooden plow, the quiet dread of winter's approach, the fragile joy of a child's laughter in a world that asks so much and gives so little. You've tasted the coarseness of bread without butter, listened for wolves beyond the trees, and waited for sleep under roofs that creak with every breeze.
But you've also witnessed endurance, not the grand kind found in epics, but the quiet, daily kind. The kind that weaves a life from scraps, holds space for hope, and offers your story to the wind, even if no one's listening. And here, in this moment, far from those muddy fields, far from that flickering hearth, you are still wrapped in something old and tender. The knowledge that humans have always kept going, even when the nights were long and the world unkind. So let that story rock you gently now. Let it hush the noise of your day, soften the edges of your thoughts, and remind you that rest is not surrender. It's a right earned with every breath. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let sleep find you as it found them, wrapped in dreams, stitched with silence, and held in the long, slow rhythm of a life once lived.